Welcome back. The Advocates for Children of New York released data indicating that around 1 in 9 New York City students experience homelessness this year. Although there may be several contributing factors, student homelessness remains a long standing problem in our city. This academic year marked the eighth consecutive year in which over 100,000 public school students were identified as homeless. Marcia Flores, the Education Partnerships Manager for AFC, joins me to discuss these findings. Marcia, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Ms. Kibin.
Now, can you just talk about AFC and what their overall goal and mission is?
Absolutely. AFC is an independent nonprofit agency whose mission is really to protect every child's right to learn. So, what that looks like is we offer free legal counsel, we have workshops, free guides on our website, and we have direct service to parents via our hotline, and that's open Monday through Thursdays. And we also have a variety of projects that we work through that target specific student populations, students in temporary housing, like what we're going to discuss today, students in foster care, students with disability, also early childhood learning students. So we cover really the full gamut of
Now,
students and their learning.
now, as you mentioned, we are going to be discussing homelessness today. Every year AFC conducts a study investigating the impact of homelessness on students in New York City. Can you just tell me a little bit more about this specific effort?
Absolutely. So, every year we release a study, and we've had a long-standing history of working with this population. The data comes directly from the New York State Education Department. The New York State public schools or New York City public schools are federally mandated to report on this population. So that is where we get the information, and year after year, we look to that to kind of figure out how we're going to best support the students in temporary housing.
Now, according to the latest research, over 100,000 students face homelessness during the school year. What were some contributing factors to seeing this really large number?
I know, unfortunately, the data that we have, again, that's given to us by the state and New York City Public Schools, does not isolate exactly the concerns and the reasons that students are in temporary housing. But we do know that there's like a lack of affordable housing right now, and has happened for many, many years. So that's one of the things that we think about when we work with this population.
Now, in this study, I know that your organization didn't conduct the study, but within this study, there are several different categories of homelessness. So, can you just tell me a little bit about, what those categories are and how they possibly differ?
hmm So the federal McKinney-Vento Act is really the law that protects these students, and they have different temporary housing categories. The first ones are like students that are actually living in shelter. The second is students who or families that are living with other families, and sometimes this is referred to as doubled up. And again, there are other families who might be living in situations that are not adequate and not permanent. So this could look like someone living in a car or a similar sort of non-stable area.
Now, the highest rate of student homelessness continued to be in the Bronx. Can you tell me a little bit more about that finding?
Right. So we found that District 9 is where a lot of these students are residing. And, this could be because District 9 has a lot of family shelters in the area. And again, the Bronx has the highest number of evictions. So coupled together, that could be a contributing factor. But District 9, again, I know you just showed the map, but it's like the western edge of the South Bronx. So that's Grand Concourse, Morsinia, East Tremont, that area, or
Well,
actually West Tremont.
well, thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely wanted to highlight that since, we are here in the Bronx and we know that the Bronx
hmm
tends to unfortunately experience some of the worst effects of any situation. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, in addition to, the Bronx, what are some other communities that are disproportionately affected by homelessness?
I mean, the harsh reality is that like Black and Brown communities are disproportionately represented in these numbers, and that's a direct link to structural racism and discrimination that these communities have faced. So this is looking like discrimination in employment and housing, the criminal justice system, healthcare. So all of these inequalities can lead to this result.
Now, the number of immigrant families arriving in New York City, according to this research, has impacted the increase and has also brought greater public attention. Can you just talk about maybe ways in your work you've seen the city address this ongoing issue of homelessness facing children?
So, the city has stood up over 100 new shelters to increase the demand for like emergency housing because obviously we've seen that there are a lot of new arrivals to New York. But in addition to that, we're really concerned about some of the policies that they are now implementing. Like, for example, there's a 60-day announcement that will limit newcomer families so that they only stay within shelter 60 days, which is so disruptive to a child's school and education because what happens is they end up moving from shelter to shelter and they don't sometimes when they receive the notice they don't know where they're going to end up, so this could mean and lead to absences. And what happens is under McKinney-Vento students have the right to stay in the school that they have already been enrolled in, but once they move it can take some days to contact the school, to update the address, to inform the bus company. And we had problems with this at the beginning of the year, and now with so many students that are in shelter who had just really started to get their bearings, they're going to now see a shift. And that is so concerning for us. And we are trying to really work on the ground to make sure that every student is aware of the situation that might be happening and working closely with their school community so that they can offset some of the effects, especially, of course, the lack of attendance that could result from something like this. And we also work with shelter-based community coordinators who help students directly connect to resources that get them into schools. So they work with the parents to learn their new address once they leave. They work with schools to update the information and really make sure that they are keeping tabs on families who are now being forced into this disruptive situation.
Now, I'm so glad that you shared that. I want to know, can you maybe in your experience working with these families, what emotional or mental toll is this having on, obviously the parents, because I can imagine that's stressful, but,
Mhm.
a lot of these young children who may not really understand what's fully happening.
Right. I mean, think about it in terms of going into school for the first few months and you're starting to get acclimated to your friends and your school community and building those ties. But then once you break that circle, it gets very difficult for students to, again, just really have the stability that they need and the constant sense of routine. So what ends up happening is they might end up having to go to another school or they face really long travel and commute times if they end up moving to a shelter that is far from where they originally were. And the idea is that, we want to make sure that students are in their schools learning their foundational education bases, right? So that they are coming to school every day, they're aware of what's going on in their classroom, they're connected to their teachers, they're connected to their friends and family, because once you break that, it gets really difficult for a student to maybe catch up and feel like they're really on the same page as everyone else. And that could lead to negative emotions, which can then lead to maybe them not wanting to or disengaging with school. And that's a very difficult situation to handle once it happens. There are obviously ways to combat that, but we want to prevent that at the start.
Now, I'm curious to know that I know that for a lot of schools, a certain amount of absences or, when a child is late too often, sometimes they will look into child services or, sometimes they'll take different routes of action. Out of concern, I'm curious to know, does your organization maybe work with the school or, contact the
Mhm.
school to let them know that the child is in a unique, specific, or maybe not unique because unfortunately so many children face this, but is there anything that happens so that the families aren't kind of negatively seeing the consequence of this?
Right. I mean, we always stress, again, preventative care, preventative measures. And like part of the work that we have been partnering with on the ground is making sure that we're in touch with school-based community coordinators who are kind of that bridge between the families who are in shelter and the school-based support teams and the students in temporary housing teams that are in the school so that they're communicating regularly and understand where these students might need support. And this could look like anything from transportation to maybe enrollment at a new place or just general healthcare supplies. So these are all concerns that we address and try to stay on top of beforehand.
Now, I understand that your organization offers resources like Project LIT or Project Lit.
Mhm.
Can you give us
Mhm.
more details about this program?
Right. No, thank you so much. AFC is housed within, or rather, Project Lit is housed within AFC, and we partner with local shelters and New York City public school staff so that we're helping students who are struggling with regularly attending um, and getting the support that they need. And essentially, what we do is we work directly with our families to troubleshoot, again, things that look like transportation, getting from the shelter to their school, enrollment options, early care options. We also provide them with the opportunity to transfer and help them transfer to another shelter that might be closer to their school. But there's a myriad of things that we really work through, and we work directly with families, talk to them. We really work with the shelter staff to understand the situation that the family is currently in. And we also provide training directly to staff and to parents about the educational rights that their students are entitled to. Because a lot of times they are, again, dealing with so many different things. And we just always want to make sure that they're aware that they're entitled to certain services for their students to help them stay in school
Now,
while
in
they're making these like transitional points.
Now, in 2022, 30 organizations called on NYC to increase educational support inside the shelters. Can you tell us a little bit more about that effort and has there been any updates?
Thank you so much for asking. We're so thankful because City Council funded 25 shelter-based community coordinators, and then New York City Public Schools also added 75 additional community-based coordinators. And again, those people are there in the shelter. They're speaking with parents. They're speaking with the schools. They're making all those connections to help families understand what they need in order to get their students to school every day. But unfortunately, the federal funding for these positions is set to expire at the end of June. And we really, really, really are trying to work with 150 organizations that are calling on, local elected officials to make sure that they sustain these funds throughout the rest of the time being, because we really, really need these folks within the schools that understand families and know how to best support them.
Now, I really want to highlight something important you said, and that, funding unfortunately is set to expire. And I'm noticing this a
Mhm.
lot with a lot of things that have to do with education. Could you quickly just let us know a little bit, about why, this funding is so important in every aspect of education?
Mhm. I mean, it's so essential to what children, schools need, and I think it's not only is it just the shelter-based community coordinators who are essential in really making sure they're connecting with families, and so many families, as we're discussing, 100,000 plus families that they're working with, or rather, I should say that we wish they were working with every family, but right now we have 100 community coordinators that are shelter based. And as we know, this problem is throughout every borough, and they're not in every borough in the capacity that we'd like them to be. So we'd like to see that grow. But in addition to that, some of these cuts are impacting 3K, which is a big population, services for English language learners. So overall, we really would love the city to continue to fund these essential players within the education community.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kibin. I really appreciate it.
For more information on their efforts, please go to their website, www.advocatesforchildren.org, or call them at their hotline number at 866-427-6033. Again, that number is 866-427-6033. Stay tuned. We have more open for you right after this.